So this will take us from 22 hopefully to 30. And if you look at 22 and 23 on this page, both of them are a little long. And again, all I do is suggest here it's your test, your time, it's your skill, etc. So these are questions that I would probably skip and come back to. I would be looking for the very easy, find the digraph in this list of very short words or short options. And those are the ones that I wouldn't want to miss. So we'll go through 22 and 23, but like I said, I would try to be saving time any way that I can on this thing. This says early in the school year, a first grade teacher wants to conduct an assessment of students' ability to read grade-appropriate words, including phonetically regular words with high-frequency irregular sight words. Which of the following informal assessments would be most appropriate and effective for this purpose? So what we need to do is pick this apart a little bit and take a look and see what it is that what conditions are setting forth in this question. And first of all, we see that this is early in the school year, so you don't expect everybody to be at the same place. So maybe you're going to be using like grade level text for whatever, this first grade, so it'll be first grade level text. And the words that they'll be looking for will be phonetically regular words and grade appropriate words. Certainly your short vowel cat, hat, sat, mat will be candidates, but more advanced things like words that contain blends and digraphs, maybe a silent E here and there, and regular high-frequency sight words like the and was and when and where and how will be there. Irregular sight words might be ones that are less frequent, of course, and are really, can be quite challenging. Through, thorough, throughout. Words of that nature might be a little maybe too advanced for first, but let's be ambitious. Why not? Those are irregular sight words. Okay. So of the options that were given, which one seems to be the most correct? What's one with the box around it? The teacher prepares a list of grade-appropriate words and asks each student to try reading the words aloud and record the results. So maybe all the odd-numbered words are words that are decodable in some way or another, either through a simple phonics rule, a simple phonics pattern, CVC, CVCE, or maybe they are words that have a blend in them or a digraph or something like that. And maybe the even ones are all sight words. The first 10 even ones are regular sight words, and the last are irregular, or they're mixed up in some way. So if you're looking for whether or not the children the student in this case, can make it through this list of grade level words, put them in a list rather than trying to put them in context, because maybe they can read them in isolation, and that's great. Maybe they can't, and then you differentiate instruction. Like if the student missed every C, V, C, E pattern, well, then you got to work on the silent E pattern, right? Right. But having them simply read the words in a sentence or something like that, they may be trying to make meaning at the same time as what they're reading. So only D is correct. If you look at A, the teacher pairs each student with a partner for shared oral reading of the simple text and makes anecdotal notes in their performance. It's more observation. Can the student work with another student? Are these students equally matched? Is this a good match, etc.? But it's not really going to get at what this teacher is after. The teacher meets individually with students and asks each student to write a list of words the student knows how to read. And, I've seen teachers do that sort of thing, and I don't think there's really anything wrong with it. But here maybe we're looking at something different, like whether or not the students got fine motor skills, what the letter formation looks like. And that's not going to get you at the grade appropriate words. And you preview the text, you extract them, you put together your list, you give it. D is the most correct. The teacher allows each student to select a grade appropriate text from the classroom library, and he asks each student to try reading the text aloud. And certainly that could be done in conjunction with the running record, right? You could do a running record to see if the student's at the independent level, the instructional level, or the frustration level, and you should know what those calculations are. They're not that hard. In this case, however, you may not have all the words that you're most interested in. Maybe the students by December have to know a certain set of rules, and you want to know who's there already, who's close, who's a little far away and who's way behind, and only D is going to get you there. So there is sort of once you get into the rhythm of this test a little bit, I think it's easier to do. Let's take a look at 23. Several first graders have mastered sounding out and blending words that follow simple short vowel phonics patterns like cat, cat, sat, at, sat. Their teacher would like to help them begin to develop whole word reading, automatic word recognition of words that follow these patterns. Which of the following instructional approaches will be most effective? So again, we're after the most effective thing. And typically that's what's done. You might encounter a least effective or something like that, but I don't think you're ever going to see kind of effective. So we got to find the best, most effective thing to do. And that's C, providing modeling and guided student practice, sounding out simple, regular words so vocally, and then reading them aloud normally. And so the most effective way to develop this automaticity, or if you're British, automacity, I guess, this is what's going to get you there. You have to have a lot of exposure. First, they have to know the rule, be able to apply the rule. After knowing and applying the rule, then we're going to work on automatic word recognition. So the student's going to practice saying them, maybe mumble reading and then saying them aloud, just to develop that rapid identification of these words. Because you don't want somebody, by the time they're 30, still sounding out cat. That's a little problematic. And you also don't want the students sounding out every word, because that's going to detract from comprehension. We'll talk about that eventually, that an important ingredient in fluency is not just accurately decoding the words or recognizing the sight words. It's also not simply prosody, being able to read the sentence if it's got a question mark, or read it emphatically if it's got an exclamation point or something like that. It's also a matter of speed. If the student is too slow and most of the time and attention is spent on trying to decode, then it's not on comprehending. Take a look at A, and let's see what it says. Using teacher read-alouds followed by echo reading and then choral rereading of the student's favorite text that includes some simple words. This would be great for a fluency question. If you have somebody who's got really a difficult time reading with expression, reading with the appropriate prosody for whatever paragraph they're reading, so you model it for them. But that's not systematic enough for a single rule and a single grouping of words that you want the child to be able to recognize automatically. So A is out. It's not systematic enough. Scheduling frequent silent independent reading practices of word lists that are based on the student's oral language vocabulary. That certainly could be used for like warm-ups and things like that, and to maybe maintain fluency once it's established on a group of words that maybe students get, the associations begin to weaken or something like that, and you want to just strengthen them a little. That is not systematic enough for this question. It's only C that does that. Exposing students to common environmental print to provide frequent exposure to everyday words and phrases. You could do that, and teachers do. You walk into a kindergarten classroom, and one way if things are kind of rocking there is if the clock's got a label underneath it, and so does the whiteboard or the chalkboard or what have you. But that's environmental print that maybe the students will be getting by just repeated exposure, maybe a little bit more naturally than other things. Not systematic enough, however. We want automatic recognition of words that follow a particular rule, so only C does that. That's what C does. Let's take a look at 24 next and see what it says. And it says, when reading aloud text, a second grade English learner often makes errors in pronunciation that are unrelated to her ability to accurately decode the words. The teacher's best response would be to, and what this is telling you, or what it's asking you, and the conditions that it's giving you, what it's really asking you to understand is the difference between things like developmental errors that students have that are just part of learning English as a first or second language. And those are pronunciation issues. Maybe reducing things like saying instead of spit, you say pit or sit or something like that, some kind of a reduction pronunciation problem. Knowing the difference between English development and transfer issues. When, for example, in some second languages, in other languages, for example, some of the phonemes have merged, like in Spanish it's common, some varieties of Spanish, I'll say it that way. Maybe the b and the v have merged, and so when the child is trying to read English and they encounter a b, sometimes it's going to come out as a v or a b sound, but maybe that b is going to be one that's going to sound non-native. And the child can read the word bat and understand what a bat is and pronounces it slightly different in a non-native way. So doing fix-up strategies for accent reduction, is a possibility, right? But the only answer that's correct in here is B. Analyzing the student's pronunciation patterns and plan an intervention to address difficulties that may affect her reading comprehension. So if the pronunciation is affecting comprehension, that's certainly when you want to intervene. If the child simply has an accent that's indicative of a speech community, how much intervention you really want to do is, there is some debate about that. But B is the most complete answer. If you look at this one, write down words that the student mispronounces and include them on a list for her to practice reading aloud. That certainly is something that could be done. I'm not in any way saying that that's not something that one could do, but it's not systematic enough. B is taking into account that an English learner has a competing phonology that they bring to the environment of learning English. And so this student's going to go through transfer issues for a time, and the student's also then going to go through development. I've got a separate video on that. I think it's the one that's called Is It Just Good Teaching? You can learn more about transfer and development, ontogeny, and other things there. Let's continue with this question, however. Encourage other students in the class to help the student work on improving her accuracy on pronunciation. That, pairing students together to work on things is a part of all of these tests from what I've seen, but it has to be strategic. Usually it's for brainstorming. Usually it's done in a way where the student is not put in, or other students, where they're not put in the position of the teacher. That's your job. You do the teaching. C looks like the students are doing the teaching, and in this case, since we're dealing also with second grade, we're still in the learning to read stage, C is out. Help the student avoid having pronunciation errors count as reading miscues by stopping her and having her correct her own words. And all the research indicates that that correction is important, correction has a place, but if the student is just trying to get their sea legs and make it through the reading of a passage, if you correct every other word, every other word, every other word, it will slow them down, perhaps frustrate that student, and they will give up. If we look at 26 now, or pardon me, let's do these in order. So sorry, let's go to 25. Which of the following approaches would be most effective in helping first grade students who have the prerequisite decoding skills learn to decode words that end in the inflectional morpheme ing? Okay, so what's challenging about this question is not only the question itself about a prerequisite decoding skill, but also they throw in some advanced language that you need to know. For example, understanding what a morpheme is, understanding what inflections are, all of that's important. And I cover that elsewhere in the reading instruction videos that I did. And so I cover that pretty much, pretty thoroughly. If I were to do it just as quickly as I can, just so that you understand the difference between something like an inflection, which I'll try to scribble here, and it's not really an opposite, it's just a different type of morpheme. So both of these are morphemes. I'll just write in morph here. You got inflections, and then you've got another flavor, you've got a derivation. And you've also got things like free and bound morphemes. I'm not going to cover that here. But an inflectional morpheme is like ing, although it can also be a derivation, so watch out. Sometimes a part of speech or something can serve two functions. Well, let's start just with some really easy inflections. Okay, so you've got the word cat with an S at the end. That S right here is an inflection. It's making a plural. That does the same thing for washes, and it has a different sound, cats, washes, and then you've got even ED, for example, you've got like tagged. ed, past tense, and you've got worked, ed, past tense, but notice that that's got a g sound. This has a t sound associated with it. These are all inflections then. All of these endings right here, the s, the es, ed, and ed, regardless of their sounds, those are all inflections. All they do is mark time and tense, past tense or number, or he worked, third singular s, he washes the dishes. So inflections do a very minor role. They don't really change grammatical categories. They will simply mark plural possessive and third singular. EREST are also inflections. If we look at ing then, and I said he was working, ing at the end, right there, that is an inflected ending. Here's your auxiliary verb, and this is your main verb. So here's your aux and your main verb with an ing. So that's sort of a tense that we use to indicate what someone was doing. If you look at the options then, explicitly teaching the student to read the unit ing in isolation before teaching them to decode the familiar word that ends in the inflection, that is the most systematic thing that you can do. And so that would mean making sure that the child can identify and recognize an S and understand that it makes the plural. So not one cat but two cats, not one bat but two bats, etc. If you look at the other options, like using a think aloud during a guided reading model to use contextual analysis as a strategy for recognizing words and using ing, first of all, they don't like context as your first approach. That's your last approach. So something like a think aloud using context would be for getting at the meaning of a particular word. There are some words that certainly have multiple meaning. A word like cool, for example, can mean different things in different contexts. Sometimes it's going to be cool as in, wow, that's really cool. Other times it'll be cool as in, wow, it's really cold outside or something like that. But that's not going to get you where you want to be with this. Having students practice reading word lists that include the ending in both formal rhyme ing as well as the inflected ing. What that means is that you'd have the student analyzing a word like bring, br, with the word family ing, bring and sing, along with working, dunking, driving. And you don't want to do two things at once. Remember, try to really look at what's going on in the question. And in this question, you're not dealing with students who can handle maybe more advanced things like this. D, teaching the inflected ending ing in the context of an instructional unit on identifying open and closed syllables and multisyllabic words. No, that is something that you would do for more complicated words that have derivations in them. I don't know if you can read this. My apologies, but believe it or not, that says derivation. Let me try to carefully write out denationalization. What you have with derivations is grammatical category hopping. So watch. You start out with nation, which is a noun. You add all, and it becomes an adjective. You add is or ize, that becomes a verb. Now we're back to a noun. But we've really changed the grammatical category and the meaning of the word. Look what prefixes do. This means to undo nationalization. So prefixes can radically alter the meaning of a word. Suffixes that change and hop grammatical categories, those are derivations. So you just have to be really careful about what you're looking at. And this answer right here, D, would be appropriate for denationalization, where you'd be sounding it out, for example, into its open and closed syllables, and then putting it together, and then structurally analyzing. That's what this is, a structural analysis. Analyzing it for particular prefixes and suffixes. All these are suffixes, but they're inflectional. They are not as powerful as the derivations over here. I did want to mention one thing with ing, like if I've got the word swim, a verb, and I add ing to it in this context, like I don't think I've spelled that correctly, but who cares? Swimming is fun. That'd be swiming, wouldn't it? Well, okay, swiming is fun. Swiming is fun. So watch this. In this context right here, let me just draw this line down. This ing is actually changing this verb into a noun. Remember the gerund? Maybe you heard that in school and you were wondering, what's a gerund? Well, that's a gerund. That is an ing noun form of a verb. And so in that context, ing is actually a derivation. So some of the things that they pick in here, I don't know if they do it on purpose, but to my mind, it's a little bit challenging. That one example I gave you much earlier about chimpanzee with the vowel digraph that was there and the ch as a digraph. I don't know. I don't know if they think about this stuff that carefully or if they're that menacing. Take your pick. It just winds up being the same thing, a giant pain in the... This is item 27 now. And item 27 says the following. A sixth grade teacher observes that several students have misspelled the word pasteurize. After writing pasteurize and Louis Pasteur on the board, the teacher explains how Pasteur invented the process of pasteurization. Students then discuss how the word pasteur relates to the word pasteurize. This instructional activity fosters students' reading and writing development primarily by, and it's A. It can only be A. Helping them learn to use etymology, in other words, the history or origin of a word, to improve spelling and decoding of multisyllabic words. So pasteurize is not referring to a pasture. Instead, it's referring to Louis Pasteur, whose name may be referring to a pasture, who knows. But if you look at B, helping them improve their ability to distinguish between similarly spelled words, that's not going to get you there. There's more to pasteurize than meets the eye. It has a history, it has a spelling pattern or manner of spelling that's related to its origin. So etymology is going to be what you want to do. Motivating them to use orthographic patterns to expand their vocabulary knowledge. Well, certainly you always want to be doing that, but in this case, because you're dealing with a word like pasture and pasteurize, it has a history and something to talk about, and a relationship between the name of the man and the name of the concept of the finding, or the name of the person, I should say, then A is correct. Motivating them to improve their spelling and decoding through the use of systematic study skills. That's not really systematic enough. And it can be a little misleading because this does look like it would involve some study skills, to look up the history and everything. But only A is correct in there. It fits the conditions best. Let's take a look at 28 now. And 28 says the following. A third grade student who is an advanced learner, so it looks like we've got a gifted student, who has already demonstrated mastery of the derivational suffixes ness and ment. So these are going to, change the grammatical categories of words, and we stack these things to make more complicated words, which will be the focus of an upcoming whole class decoding and spelling lesson. I need to read that again. I'm sorry about that. A third grade student who is an advanced learner has already demonstrated mastery of the derivational suffixes ness and ment, which will be the focus of an upcoming whole class decoding and spelling lesson. So this kid's already got it. He's or she is good to go. Which of the following strategies for differentiating instruction for this lesson would be most appropriate for the student? So in this case, we've got someone who can already do what's going to be asked of everyone else. And so introducing the student to higher level derivational suffixes is the place you want to go. Certainly you can be doing all kinds of things, learning how to stack suffixes and stacking suffixes like anti-disestablishmentarianism, for example. It's maybe something that you could do with structural analysis. Having the student work on inflectional suffixes. Inflectional suffixes are a little easier than derivations in many ways. Certainly, that doesn't guarantee that the student is not going to have problems with those things, just because they may seem easier to a point-headed intellectual such as myself. But it does not fit the conditions of the questions. You would have to go after more advanced things for this student. If we look at the next possibility, teaching the student to count, getting a little tired here. Teaching the student the content plan for the following lesson. No, that's not what you want to do. This means that the student has mastered what is the focus of the next lesson. That doesn't mean that the student is ready for even more advanced things that are beyond the scope of what's being taught. What it means is that within the context of this lesson, which deals with derivations, The student is simply ready for more advanced derivations. Encouraging the student to engage in independent silent reading, that is not going along with the context of the question at all. And as a distractor, that would be an obvious distractor. Which of the following pairs are homophones? I cover homophones in my lectures and stuff, so you can take a look at what I have to say about that. These are same-sounding words in sight and sight. They fit the bill. Table and stable, this looks like we're changing onsets here. That's what it looks like to me. Adding a T or adding an ST blend. Playful and replayed, well, this is different uses of a prefix and a suffix, but those are not homophones, answer and reply. Your homophones are same-sounding words. Homo, same, phone, sound. These sound the same, sight and sight, but the context dictates the spelling, so it has to be D, and it is. Which brings us at last to question number 30, and let's see what it says. A second grade teacher would like to include independent silent reading as one of several approaches used to promote student fluency and development. When planning differentiated fluency instruction for individual students in the class, the teacher should keep in mind that using independent silent reading to promote fluency, and here we go, should be limited to students who have already acquired automaticity. And so automaticity simply means automatic word recognition. And if you pick out the rest of these things, the type of text that you would use in this instance, let me bump this up just a little bit, have to be at the student's independent reading level. And if you have a student who's not, doesn't have any independent reading level at all yet, then language experience approaches are ones that you might want to look at, where you're using the student's own words, own spellings, own drawings, old invented writing with the teacher caption underneath it. Maybe that's what you would use for such a student. But C is never going to be correct. Is most effective when students select text at or above their instructional reading level? No, because if it's above the instructional reading level, then that's going to be frustration, and all the child's going to do, according to this model, is get frustrated. And I will take the time to write that all the way out, and I won't ever do that again because it's frustrating. So C is out. Should be limited to narrative texts in the early elementary grades. There's research out there that says that, students come to the classroom sort of understanding plot, setting, and character, having gotten that from stories they've been read to at home. If that didn't occur, perhaps through cartoons they watch or oral language stories that are told at home. So maybe narrative is easier, but there's other research out there that suggests that informational text is easier because typically it has short declarative sentences. This is a bee, the bee has wings, the bee gives us honey, blah, 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 much less dense. So given that controversy, B is out, but then that doesn't even fit within the context of the question. Is most critical for students whose sight word knowledge is below grade level? Absolutely not. Remember, you got to be using independent level text for this sort of thing, and you have to have a student who has some level of automaticity in their decoding and recognition of automatic sight words in order to make this work. Great, we made it to 30. Looks like we're halfway there, and we'll pick up the rest when we can.